The room smelled like disinfectant and quiet despair. Machines beeped with indifferent rhythm, and pale light from the blinds traced hard lines across the white walls. On the hospital bed lay Jonathan Uche, once a name that echoed through boardrooms, now barely a man. Tubes protruded from his arms like roots from a dying tree. An oxygen mask clung to his face, and his chest rose in shallow, irregular beats. Outside the glass door, two doctors spoke in hushed tones. "He hasn't responded to anything in weeks. We've done what we can. Grief is crueler than cancer. You really think he's waiting to die? I think he's already gone." Their voices trailed off. Inside, the only sound was the steady, mechanical heartbeat of machines, until something else emerged. A sound so soft it slipped through the cold like a thread of gold. A voice, a child's voice. She was barefoot, standing still as a candle in the wind. Her dress was an ash-colored smock, threadbare and stained with street mud. Hair tangled like a bird's nest framed her narrow face, and her skin bore the texture of dust and sun. She looked like she hadn't eaten properly in days. But when she opened her mouth, everything else vanished. No music played behind her. No choir backed her. Just her voice, gentle, raw, fragile. A song rose not in volume, but in power. It was the kind of sound that could only be described as felt, rather than heard. A lullaby not from this world. Jonathan's finger twitched. Then his hand moved. A nurse gasped audibly and nearly dropped her clipboard. One of the doctors bolted through the door. "Jonathan, Mr. Uche." Jonathan's eyelids fluttered, and then, slowly, as if the very act defied the laws of nature, they opened. His gaze scanned the room sluggishly, unfocused, until it landed on her. On the girl. 3 days earlier, Olivia had been weaving through the maze of shoddy market under the punishing Lagos sun, balancing a sack of tomatoes on her head. Her small frame darted between puddles and piles of trash. Sweat stung her eyes, but she didn't wipe it away. She couldn't afford to stop, not when the woman who sent her on the errand would scream if she was late again. She was 10 years old and had already forgotten what it felt like to live without fear. 2 years ago, she had a family, a real one. Her parents, Musa and Nkechi, were poor but warm, loud, kind. They'd died in a horrific car crash that should have taken her to the wreck, had been flattened like paper. But Olivia had emerged with not a scratch. That was the beginning of the curse. "She's a witch," her Aunt Monica hissed at the funeral. "How can a child survive that unless she's cursed?" No one challenged her. The whispers started, then the stares, and then the silence. By the end of that month, no one in the family would take her in. They left her, quite literally, on the roadside. Olivia lived where no child should, under bridges, behind broken kiosks, inside abandoned containers. She ate only when she could carry something heavy enough to earn a few naira. She sang not because she wanted to, but because it was the only part of herself no one had tried to take from her yet. At night, when the city slept, she would lie on torn cardboard and hum. Sometimes, strangers walking past would stop. A few dropped coins, some wept. One woman, crying silently under an umbrella, once whispered, "Your voice. It reaches somewhere I'd forgotten I had." Olivia never forgot those words, nor did she forget the dream. It came only once, but so vividly she woke in tears. She was standing beside a dying man, a stranger, and singing to him. Her song pulled him back. In the dream, he opened his eyes, smiled at her, and said, "You are more powerful than you think." That morning, she stood up from her damp shelter under the bridge and walked. She didn't know where, just walked, and ended up at the gate of August Modern Hospital. The security guard barely glanced at her. "No begging allowed here." Not begging," she said quietly. Her stomach growled. She took a step inside anyway, inside the bright, cold, air-conditioned lobby. She was invisible until she overheard the staff whispering by the front desk. "They said he won't last the night. He's given up. No will to fight." "The man in room 509, Mr. Uche." She blinked. The name meant nothing to her, but the feeling did. "That's him," she said suddenly. The nurse looked down. "What?" "I saw him. In my dream. The man who was dying." The man beside her snorted. "You've seen too many Nollywood movies." "I can help him," she said simply. The nurse hesitated. "How?" "I will sing for him." The man laughed out loud. "You with that torn gown and dust on your face." But the nurse didn't laugh. She looked again at the girl, at the quiet steel in her small eyes. "It won't hurt to try." she murmured. And with that, Olivia was led down the corridor of glass and silence. People stared, a few pointed. Who let that beggar in? Someone muttered. They entered the special wing. Machines clicked softly in the background. Inside, a man who once ruled oil, tech, and shipping empires lay hollowed out, more ghost than flesh. That's when Olivia stepped forward, laid one small hand on the bed rail, closed her eyes, and sang. In the present, Olivia still stood by that bed. The machines now beeped stronger. The nurses had gathered at the door. The doctor, stunned, examined Jonathan with frantic hands. He's stabilizing. Oxygen uptake just improved. Unbelievable. Jonathan blinked again. His mouth moved under the mask. The doctor removed it. Carefully, sir. Can you hear me? Jonathan turned his head and whispered. Who is she? I don't know, the doctor said. She just came. Jonathan looked again at Olivia. She smiled, not with pride, not for praise, just a quiet, knowing smile. You came back, he murmured, unsure if he was awake or still dreaming. I never left, she whispered. By the next morning, Olivia was the most talked about person in the hospital. Nurses passed her food wrapped in napkins. A spare room was offered to her, with a real bed. The director personally came down to see her, but Olivia asked for only one thing. Can I sing for him again? And she did that evening, and the next morning, and the next. Jonathan listened to every note, eyes closed, not always speaking, but always present. On the third morning, he spoke again. I don't know who you are, but your voice, it found me. Olivia said nothing. She just held his hand, the way a daughter might hold her father's. I'm not dead, am I? No, sir, you didn't let me die. No, she said gently, because someone in this world still needs you. The room that Olivia now called hers still smelled like antiseptic and fresh linens. A small bed with stiff white sheets sat against the wall. There was a chair, a desk, and a tiny window with sunlight that came in like an unfamiliar guest. She had a toothbrush, a pair of slippers, a nightgown that wasn't torn, and for the first time in years, she had a door she could close. She stood by the window on her first morning, watching a janitor water flowers on the balcony 2 floors below. She wasn't used to this much quiet. On the street, quiet meant danger. In here, it meant safety, or at least, something like it. A knock pulled her from her thoughts. It was Nurse Halima, the kind-eyed one who hadn't flinched when Olivia arrived, barefoot and mud-streaked. Double quotes, time for breakfast, she said with a smile, holding a tray with eggs, bread, and tea. Proper one, not market scraps. Olivia blinked at the food like it was gold. For me, Halima laughed softly. Who else? Meanwhile, Jonathan Uche sat upright in his hospital bed for the first time in nearly a month. The doctors barely concealed their awe. He had gone from a dying man to a recovering one in mere days. His vitals stabilized, his appetite returned. And every evening, he asked the same thing. Will she sing again today? On the 5th morning, he spoke her name, not because anyone had told him, but because he remembered it. Olivia. That day, they sat together properly for the first time. She was shy at first, picking at her fingers. He looked older than she had imagined, up close. His beard had grown wild, streaks of grey curling under his chin. But his eyes were alive now. Even if tired, you don't talk much, he said gently. You don't either, she replied without looking at him. He chuckled, caught off guard. Fair enough. Silence settled between them, but not an awkward one. More like the quiet between two people standing at the edge of something vast. I dreamed of you, he said suddenly. Before I woke up, Olivia's eyes flicked up. You were singing, I saw your face. I thought maybe I was gone already. But the song, it pulled me back. She swallowed. I dreamed of you too. Before I ever came here. They both paused, and then Jonathan said, softly, strange how life works. As the days passed, their connection deepened. He asked about her parents, and she told him everything, not just the crash, but the aftermath, the whispers, the accusation, the abandonment. Jonathan listened without interrupting. They called me a witch, she said once, barely above a whisper, because I didn't die. He nodded slowly. People fear what they don't understand, and sometimes they'd rather curse a survivor than face their own guilt. Olivia blinked. Your voice, he said. It didn't just heal my body. It made me want to be alive again. Most people just say thank you. I'm not most people. One morning, as she sat peeling an orange by his bedside, Jonathan asked, what do you want, Olivia? If you could be anything. She hesitated. You can say anything. There are no wrong answers. She looked at him then, her eyes clear. I want to fly. He tilted his head. Like, fly? How? I want to be a pilot, she said. Planes, skies. I want to see the clouds my parents never got to see. Jonathan stared at her for a long time. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that reaches deep into the chest. Then let's get you wings. That same evening, the hospital director called an emergency press conference. Cameras, journalists, chaos. Jonathan appeared in a wheelchair, pale but upright, with Olivia by his side. I wouldn't be here today if not for this girl, he said to the sea of reporters. She gave me a reason to breathe, to live, and starting today, I'll give her the same. He paused. I have begun legal proceedings to adopt Olivia Duca as my daughter. Gasps, shutters clicked like thunder. Some reporters whispered PR, stunt, others cried. One journalist from Channels TV wept openly, saying, God does answer prayers, but Olivia just stood beside him, small hand gripping the armrest of his chair. Expression unreadable, because even she didn't quite believe it yet. 2 weeks later, the court order came through, and that's how Olivia, once a ghost in the gutters of Lagos, moved into a sprawling mansion on Banana Island, guarded by high black gates and crawling with gardeners, housekeepers, and the smell of imported soap. Her new room was the size of an entire kiosk. The bed was soft and smelled like lavender. The closet had clothes she didn't know how to wear. There was a ceiling that glowed like stars when the lights turned off. On her first night there, she didn't sleep. She just lay there, staring at the fake stars, whispering, is this real? Her days changed. She woke to breakfast with Jonathan. She had tutors, music lessons, math, English, science, flight theory. A simulator was installed on the property. Real controls, real software. Olivia took to it like she was born with wings. You were made for the sky. Her instructor muttered the second week. This girl's no joke. Jonathan watched from the glass doors, heart full. He would smile and then retreat to his study, hiding the tears he couldn't quite explain, but not everyone was smiling. In a dark, quiet sitting room elsewhere in Lagos, Benedict Unica, Jonathan's estranged cousin, watched the news replay the press conference. He was a man of polished shoes and poisonous smiles, a lawyer by training, a strategist by nature, and a leech by instinct. He poured himself a glass of palm wine and muttered, so the old man finally lost it. A younger man in the corner didn't respond. That was Benedict's assistant, a silent shadow who had learned not to interrupt his moods. She's in the will now, Benedict said bitterly. All that empire, and he hands it to some stray girl. He sipped. Let's see how long this miracle child lasts. Back in Banana Island, Olivia sat in the garden as the sun melted into the ocean. She had her feet tucked under her, and a flight manual resting in her lap. Jonathan joined her, carrying 2 cups of Zobo. I used to sit here with my daughter, he said quietly. Olivia didn't ask what happened. He had told her bits and pieces, enough to know she had once had a sister she would never meet. You would have liked her, he said. I already do. He nodded. They sipped quietly, and the sky darkened, somewhere far away. A plan had begun to take root, but for now, the world was still, and Olivia didn't yet know that her wings would soon be tested by storms. For a while, it felt like the world had healed. Olivia's days bloomed with sunlight and purpose. Her simulator training advanced rapidly. Her instructors couldn't hide their admiration. If she were 18, we'd be talking licenses already, one whispered. But it wasn't just her hands that were strong, it was her heart. Inspired by her own experience with music and healing, Olivia quietly began working with Jonathan on an idea, Sing to Heal. It started small. A recording studio was built in the east wing of the mansion. Olivia, with help from a team of therapists and musicians, recorded lullabies, soft vocal prayers, guided songs meant for patients in recovery, trauma survivors, or anyone lost in the fog of sadness. The concept took off faster than anyone expected. A few videos were uploaded. A nurse shared one with a friend in Ibadan. A grieving widow listened to Olivia's voice and sent a thank you letter. Then came donations. Then hospitals called. Your voice, one therapist said during a Zoom call, is doing what medicine often can't. Olivia listened with a shy smile, but deep down, it made sense. She had lived on the edge of silence. She knew what it felt like to want to disappear. Her voice had saved her first, Jonathan second. Now, it was reaching hundreds. Jonathan was more than proud. He was changed. He'd returned to business, but in a different way. Softer, warmer. He began introducing Olivia at private events, not as the girl who saved me, but as my daughter. Not a symbol, not a story. His daughter, she's sharp. He told board members during a retreat, and one day, she'll lead this foundation, not just because she's mine, but because she's earned it. Some nodded, others stiffened. The old guard wasn't ready, but Jonathan didn't care. In another part of the city, Benedict sat in a leather chair inside his apartment, the windows covered with blackout curtains. His fingers drummed against a printed article, From Bridge to Boardroom, Olivia Duca and the billionaire she saved. His jaw clenched. Look at her, he spat, smiling like she'd built this empire. His assistant remained quiet. She's in every headline, every boardroom whisper. Jonathan's talking succession, legacy, transferring power. To her he rose suddenly and paced. I've waited patiently, watched Jonathan rot. I was ready to take it all when he gave up. His eyes narrowed. But now this child shows up with her miracle voice and takes everything I bled for. He picked up his phone. Call Chike, tell him it's time. Back at the mansion, Olivia sat in the garden with her tutor, solving advanced geometry. She was getting used to the smell of lavender and honeydew. She no longer flinched at the sound of doors opening. But that evening, something shifted. The cook, Mr. Ibrahim, brought up dinner as usual. Jollof rice, grilled chicken, fried plantains. The aroma was stronger than usual, but not in a good way. There was something off, something sharp beneath the spices. Olivia froze. She didn't know why. Maybe it was instinct, the same one that had helped her survive alleys and back streets. She didn't eat. Instead, she excused herself and quietly carried the plate to the kitchen. Mr. Ibrahim, she said, voice calm but direct. The elderly chef turned. Yes, madam. She held up the plate. Please smell this. He lifted the cover, leaned in, and immediately recoiled. Ah, this no be my food. Oh, something day wrong here. They rushed the plate to Jonathan's private doctor, who was still on call. Traces of rat poison were detected. Jonathan was livid. He summoned the entire house staff. I don't care who touched what. Someone wanted my daughter dead. There was silence. No one confessed. Surveillance footage had been conveniently erased, and the maid who served the plate, gone, resigned that same night, vanished. Olivia barely slept. The next day, she didn't sing. 2 days later, an envelope arrived at Jonathan's office. No return address. Inside, a typed letter. Reverse the adoption or bury the girl. She doesn't belong in this world. There were no fingerprints, no trace. Jonathan hid the letter from Olivia, but the stress gnawed at him. At night, he stared out windows, checked every lock twice, watched her more than he used to, always with a quiet fear. During a board meeting days later, he stood up to present a quarterly strategy and collapsed. Paramedics arrived within minutes. The headlines exploded. Billionaire Jonathan Uche back in ICU, daughter by his side, as condition stabilis. But the worst was yet to come. It started with a knock. 2 days after Jonathan fell into coma again, a group of lawyers arrived at the mansion's front gate. They presented papers, official stamped, NOTARIZED. Inside those pages, a revised legal document allegedly signed by Jonathan 3 weeks earlier, naming Benedict Uche as the interim trustee of the entire estate and business holdings until Olivia reached the age of 21. The staff didn't know how to react. Some questioned the timing. Others remembered the earlier threats, but the signatures looked real. Benedict arrived in person 3 hours later, walking through the house like it was already his. He wore a sharp navy blue suit. His smile had no warmth. He patted the butler's shoulder and said, "Ah, feels good to be home." No one responded. He called for a house meeting. "This house will be under new structure," he announced, standing in the central hallway. "Until Jonathan recovers, or doesn't, I will oversee all assets, contracts, and operations, including guardianship of the girl." He didn't say her name, just the girl. Olivia stood on the stairs, watching from above. She didn't say a word. That night, her bedroom door didn't feel like a barrier. It felt like a trap. Her window, still locked. The house had changed, the temperature, the tension. People who once smiled, now averted their eyes. A few staff members who had always supported her were reassigned. Others resigned quietly. She noticed one of her photos, the one Jonathan had framed in the sitting room, had been taken down. The walls whispered now. Why is she here anyway? She's not real family. He's not even awake. Why is she still living here? Olivia sat in the corner of her room, arms wrapped around her knees. This house was once her rescue. Now, it felt like a cage. In Jonathan's hospital room, monitors beeped rhythmically. He lay still, pale, silent, outside. The doctor and a nurse whispered about possible brain swelling. Inside the mansion, Benedict made calls, cancelled Olivia's training, closed the Sing to Heal project, citing unnecessary expenses, removed her access to flight simulators, even had the family lawyer fired, replaced with one of his own. He walked into her study and flipped through her flight notes, scoffing. "Pilot," he said under his breath, "you'll be lucky to keep your bed." But Olivia didn't cry. She watched, listened, and waited, because something inside her had changed again. The same way it had the night her aunt called her a witch, the night she slept under a bridge and sang. Something old was waking up, something fierce, something focused. She didn't know how yet, but she would fight. The house had grown quiet in all. The wrong ways gone were the soft guitar instrumentals. Olivia used to play through the speakers, the smell of fresh bread from the kitchen, the occasional laughter echoing down the halls. Now the silence creaked. Even the birds seemed to avoid the windows. Olivia walked lightly through the marble corridors, eyes scanning corners, ears tuned to murmurs. The house was still hers, on paper, but every hallway belonged to Benedict now. He walked with casual dominance, hands clasped behind his back, smirking at staff as if he were doing them a favor by existing. Her school access was blocked. Her emails were monitored. Her pilot training suspended. The Sing to Heal wing was locked and marked for renovation. Olivia knew what that meant. Erasure, not just of a project of her, but she wasn't 10 anymore. She had been called a witch, starved, abandoned. She had survived bridges and backstreets. Now, she was inside the lion's den. And this time, she would not run. Her first step, allies. Late at night, she slipped out of her room and crept through the staff hallway to find Joseph, Jonathan's longtime security chief. He was cleaning his old handgun when she knocked on the utility door. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I know. What do you need?" "I need to know who's still loyal." He stared at her for a beat, then nodded once. "I've been waiting for you to ask." By the next morning, she had a team of 4. Joseph Amaka, the junior housekeeper, Miss Ibrahim, the chef, and, surprisingly, Chenier, a quiet assistant who had once worked under Jonathan's lawyer. "I have reason to believe Benedict forged the new will," Olivia said, gathered in a back storage room with a hand-drawn floor plan taped to the wall. She spoke calmly, clearly, like she was leading a briefing, not a rebellion. "He's also trying to remove any evidence I ever lived here, and I think..." She paused. "I think he plans to make sure Jonathan never wakes up." They froze. "You have proof?" Joseph asked. "Not yet, but I'm going to get it." The first discovery came 3 days later. Joseph noticed something odd about the grandfather clock in the east hallway. It ticked, but too quietly. He pried it open and found a small microphone wired through the panel. They found 4 more bugs hidden in vents and lamp bases. Someone was recording her, or at least trying to, Amaka whispered. "He's watching everything." Not everything. Not her dreams. Not what she was about to do next. Late one night, Olivia slipped through the hallway near the guest wing where Benedict had made his base. The light under his study door was still on. She waited and waited until she heard his voice. "When he dies, it's all mine." She froze, pressed herself against the wall. "I don't care if the girl cries on the news," Benedict continued. "The will is airtight. The staff are split. Jonathan can't wake up. That's the only condition." Her breath caught. "You hear me? If he wakes up, everything collapses. I'm not risking that again." The line went silent. Then, "I don't care how. Just make sure he stays under." Olivia's hands trembled, but she held the recorder tight in her pocket. She had it all. The next morning, she made one more call to Mr. Okoye, the family's original lawyer, who had been quietly removed weeks earlier. He answered on the first ring. "Olivia, I have something," she said, "and I need you here, with someone from the court." "You're not safe, are you?" "No, I'll come today." By late afternoon, a plan was in motion. Joseph secured the hallway. Amaka distracted the house staff with a fire drill. Mr. Okoye arrived in an unmarked car with a justice officer wearing plain clothes. Benedict was in the main dining room. sipping wine and dictating a property memo to a secretary when the doors opened. Olivia stepped in first. Behind her came Mr. Okoye, then the officer, then Joseph. "Ah," Benedict said, not looking up. "The princess returns." She walked straight to the center of the room. Calm, clean, composed. "I need to speak," she said. "You need to leave. This is a private meeting. This house is not yours." She interrupted, voice clear. He turned sharply, insulted. "What nonsense are you spitting now?" She held up the small device, a single press, and his voice filled the room. "When he dies, it's all mine. Jonathan can't wake up. I don't care how. Just make sure he stays under." Silence fell like a dropped stone. The secretary gasped. The justice officer stepped forward. "Mr. Benedict Unica, you are under investigation for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted poisoning, and document forgery." Benedict stood up abruptly. "This is a trick. This is a setup. You can't prove any of this." Mr. Okoye smiled calmly. "Actually, we can." "You little snake." Benedict turned toward Olivia, face twisted. But 2 guards were already. Behind him, handcuffs clicked. "No," he shouted. "This house was meant to be mine." As he was dragged out, he locked eyes with her one last time. "You'll regret this. Blood always wins." Olivia didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She stood like stone that evening. The house was quiet again, but in a different way. Staff returned to their original roles. Portraits were rehung. Locks were changed. The family's financial control returned to Mr. Okoye until Jonathan recovered. But Jonathan was still in a coma, and as Olivia sat by his bedside, the weight of everything caught up to her. She took his hand gently. "Daddy," she whispered, "I did what I could. I kept our home safe. I stopped him." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "But I can't fix this part. Not without you." The machines beeped slowly. The light in the room was pale blue. She sat in silence for a long time, watching him breathe. Then she leaned forward, rested her forehead against his shoulder, and whispered, "Maybe it's time to try the only thing I have left." She sat back, took a deep breath, and began to sing. The hospital was cold again. Not in temperature. The AC still hummed like always, but in spirit. Olivia walked through the glass doors with her heart wrapped. In iron she had faced betrayal, deception, and isolation. She had fought her way through shadows in a house that once promised light. Now all that was left was this man, this room, this moment. Jonathan lay motionless, machines steady but dull, a digital rhythm that marked time, but not life. She stepped in quietly, closing the door behind her. Her shoes barely made a sound. She pulled the chair close, sat down, and rested her hands in her lap. His hand was cold, dry. Her fingers curled around it gently. For a while, she said nothing, just watched him, studied the curve of his jaw, the streaks of gray in his beard, the soft rise of his chest. "I stopped him," she whispered finally. "Benedict's gone. The house is safe. Your name is safe." She swallowed hard. "But I need you now." Silence answered. Her hand trembled slightly. She closed her eyes. And then, she did what she hadn't done in days. Not since the poisoning. Not since the threats. Not since the mansion became a battlefield. She sang. But this time, her voice was different. It didn't tremble with fear or hesitation. It rose, slow and strong, like the swell of ocean waves at dawn. Each note was carved from memory, from dusty market corners, from cardboard shelters, from cold nights under bridges, from laughter in the mansion garden, from whispered bedtime stories and missed birthdays. Her song wasn't for the world anymore. It was for him, for the man who gave her a name, who gave her a home. It was a song about family, about battle, about coming back from places no one returns from. "You gave me a door when I had none, a light when I only knew the dark. Now don't go where I can't follow. There's still skies to fly, still love to carry." The monitors stayed steady. But she kept singing. She sang until her throat burned, until her hands went numb, until the light outside the window changed from silver to amber. And then, like a ripple in still water, his fingers moved. She gasped, "Daddy." His eyelids fluttered. The monitor beeped louder. The doctor on duty burst in, nearly dropping his clipboard. "Jonathan." His lips parted. A whisper, rough and cracked. "Olivia." Tears flooded her eyes instantly. "You're back," she breathed. "I never left." He rasped. The doctor's voice faded into a blur as he called nurses, as machines recalibrated, and protocols snapped into motion. But Olivia didn't move. She just held him like the world was finally whole again. 3 months later, the hangar was quiet as the crowd waited. Rows of white chairs, cameras everywhere, a giant banner reading, "Nigeria celebrates its youngest pilot, Olivia Uche." She stepped onto the platform in a crisp navy blue pilot uniform, gold stripes on her shoulder, braided hair tucked into a neat bun. The crowd erupted. Jonathan, sitting front row in a wheelchair, clapped until his palms ached. When she took the mic, her voice was calm. "I used to sleep under bridges. I used to carry tomatoes in markets for 100 naira a day. I was called a witch for surviving something no child should." She paused. The room held its breath. "But I survived. Not just because I was strong, but because one day someone gave me something stronger than shelter. He gave me belief." Her eyes found Jonathan, and that belief helped me fly. Back at the mansion, the halls were full again, but not with fear. There was music, laughter, the smell of fresh bread once more. The Sing to Heal Center had reopened, bigger, better. It now operated from 3 locations across Lagos and streamed to hospitals in Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa. Thousands listened to Olivia's voice daily, sometimes as therapy, sometimes as hope. Her recordings were translated into multiple languages. Her voice, once muffled by the chaos of city streets, now reached across borders. One afternoon, during a health seminar at the Sing to Heal Center, Olivia bumped into a doctor reviewing a report. He was tall, soft-spoken, with quiet eyes and a habit of speaking gently even when he didn't have to. Dr. Johnson. They started working on a trauma recovery program together. Weekly meetings turned into daily calls. Daily calls turned into long walks, then laughter, then everything else. A year later, they were married in the same garden where she used to sip zobo with Jonathan at sunset. 2 years after that, twin boys were born, Jerry and Joshua. They filled the house with giggles, sticky fingerprints, and questions Olivia loved answering. Jonathan never asked her to move out. "This is your home," he said, sitting in the library as one of the boys clambered onto his lap. Forever. He aged gently, with peace, with pride. He watched Olivia raise her sons with fire and softness, watched her fly solo missions, sign international agreements, and grow Sing to Heal into a full-scale mental wellness movement. Sometimes he would watch her from the garden and whisper to no one in particular, "That voice, that girl, saved my soul." Years later, on a crisp Harmattan morning, Olivia stepped into the cockpit of a new private aircraft named the Duka 1. Her sons waved from below. Her husband gave her a mock salute. Jonathan, now older, stood with a cane, still tall in spirit. She smiled, climbed into the pilot's seat, adjusted her headset, and ran the final checks. As the plane lifted from the runway, Lagos unfurled beneath her like a promise. The city where she had been abandoned, cursed, reborn now blinked at her from 1,000 windows. She switched on the cockpit radio, hummed a note, then, softly, into the headset, she sang, "Now I can fly." If you made it to the end, comment the word Skybound, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with friends and family.